The blind date was supposed to be simpler, quiet, corner table, soft golden lights, and a promise of a fresh start after years of loneliness. But as the narrator sat there, minutes stretched into long, heavy echoes of disappointment. Every passing face wasn't the one he hoped would walk through the door, and every laugh from nearby tables felt like a reminder of the life he wasn't living. He stared at the untouched glass of water, trying to convince himself that being stood up didn't mean he was unworthy, just unlucky. Still, the sinking feeling grew heavier, swallowing the last bits of excitement he had allowed himself to feel. It wasn't just a date he had hoped for. It was the possibility of connection, of healing, what heartbreak had left behind. The waitress passed again, offering a sympathetic smile that made the loneliness sharper, and he wondered if fate liked playing tricks on people who were trying to begin again. Silence wrapped around him like a cold blanket, whispering that maybe tonight wasn't meant to change anything at all, until the restaurant door swung open and something completely unexpected happened. Little footsteps echoed across the polished floor, drawing everyone's attention as two identical twin girls, no older than 6, marched confidently toward his table with matching backpacks bouncing behind them. Their big bright eyes scanned the room until they found Hintha, only one sitting alone. The only one who looked like he needed exactly what was about to happen. Without hesitation, one of them tugged at his sleeve, while the other placed a small crumpled note on the table. And with a sweet but serious voice, she announced, "Our daddy's sorry, he's late." The entire restaurant froze for a moment, caught between confusion and curiosity, as the twins climbed into the empty chairs as if rehearsed. He blinked, trying to understand if this was some kind of prank, but the sincerity on their tiny faces made it impossible to doubt them. The room that felt painfully empty moments ago suddenly overflowed with unexpected warmth, mischief, and the fragile hope that something remarkable had just begun. Before he could form a question, one twin began swinging her legs while explaining that their daddy had run into grown-up trouble, and the other opened her backpack to pull out a small sketchbook filled with drawings of a man and two girls holding hands. Each drawing carried a sense of longing, as though the girls feared being misunderstood without visual proof of the love they shared. He listened, captivated, as they told him how their dad had been nervous about meeting someone for the first time in years, how he had gotten ready 3 times before they approved his outfit, and how he promised them this date might finally bring happiness back into their small family. Their innocence melted down all the walls he had built around his heart, and instead of worrying about being stood up, he suddenly found himself wanting to protect these 2 little whirlwinds who had barged into his evening like tiny, determined angels with a mission. The twins kept talking, filling the emotional gaps of the missing man with stories that painted him as a hard-working single father who carried the world on his shoulders, but never let it crush his smile. They told him how their dad cooked terrible pancakes but made the best bedtime stories, how he worked 2 jobs but still braided their hair before school, and how he had been scared that any woman he met would reject them because they came as a package. The words hit him deeper than expected, not because the children were charming, but because he understood that kind of fear too well. He knew what it felt like to want connection but dread the vulnerability that came with it. And somehow, these little girls were tearing through his loneliness with every innocent confession. The restaurant lights didn't seem dim anymore. Instead, everything felt softer, warmer, like life itself had paused to deliver something he didn't know he needed. Just as he began laughing at one of their stories about their dad burning toast so badly the fire alarm cried before he could. A breathless voice called out from the entrance. A tall man rushed in, adjusting his shirt and scanning the room with panic written all over him until his eyes landed on the twins. He hurried toward them, apologizing between gasps and thanking the narrator for not being frightened by his daughter's boldness. But the moment their eyes met, something shifted. Not the lightning strike love people bragged about in movies, but a soft, grounding recognition, like 2 tired souls acknowledging each other in a crowd. The man's smile was nervous but sincere, his presence humble yet comforting, and in that moment, the narrator understood why the twins adored him. He wasn't late because he didn't care. He was late because life had demanded too much from him, but he still showed up, breathless and hopeful. The girls introduced them like tiny matchmakers, proudly explaining how they saved the date before it could break and fall apart, making both men laugh. As the kids dug into the breadbasket, the 2 adults finally started talking, hesitant at first, then slowly opening up as if the twins had magically dissolved all awkwardness. He learned how the father had been raising the girls alone since their mother left, how he feared dating again because he didn't want anyone to feel burdened by their presence, and how tonight was his first step toward believing he still deserved companionship. In return, he confessed his own fears of loneliness, of being forgotten, of trying again after too many disappointments. The conversation was raw, honest, and deeper than what most first dates ever dared to be. And through it all, the girls chimed in with random commentary, laughter, and questions that kept guiding the adults back to each other. Dinner became an unexpected symphony of chaos and tenderness, spilled juice, shared stories, shy glances, and tiny hands occasionally grabbing theirs as if reminding them what truly mattered. the twins offered him crayons from their backpack, insisting he join them in drawing a family picture practice. And he found himself sketching with a smile he hadn't worn in years. The father watched him with gentle curiosity, as though seeing someone interact with his daughters so naturally stirred emotions he wasn't prepared to confront. And in those simple, messy moments, the date transformed into something far more meaningful than either man expected. It wasn't romantic magic or perfect chemistry, it was real, human connection forming in the space between laughter, vulnerability, and the soft acceptance of each other's imperfect lives. When dessert arrived, the twins proudly declared that the narrator had passed the test, confusing him until their dad admitted that his daughters had secretly prepared approval rules for anyone he ever met. The rules were adorable: must be kind, must not mind messy hair days, must listen to their stories, must laugh at their jokes, and must like pancakes even if they tasted like charcoal. And the fact that he fulfilled every one of them without trying made the father's voice soften with gratitude. For the first time that night, the man's eyes carried more hope than fear. It was clear he had walked into the restaurant expecting rejection, but instead he found someone who embraced the chaos he came with. And the narrator realized he didn't feel like he was settling for a second chance at life. He felt like he was discovering something he didn't know was missing. As the evening drew to a close, the twins refused to let him leave without promising they would meet again, clinging to his hands as if afraid he might disappear like people had before. Their father apologized, but he shook his head gently, reassuring them he wanted to see them again just as much. Outside, the cool night breeze wrapped around the four of them, and for a moment, none of them wanted to walk away. It wasn't just a date ending, it was a meaningful chapter beginning, filled with possibilities none of them had expected. When the evening started with an empty table and sinking hope, the father hesitated before asking if he'd like to meet them again next week. Not for a date, but for something simpler, something real. Like a walk in the park where the kids could show him their favorite swings. And he agreed without a second thought. As the twins waved goodbye, and the father gave one last grateful smile, the narrator realized the night had rewritten his entire belief in chance, timing, and human connection. He had walked into the restaurant expecting disappointment, yet he left with something far more precious than a simple date. He left with the beginning of a found family, the quiet promise of healing, and the warm knowledge that sometimes the universe sends you exactly what you need in the form of two little girls, with fearless hearts and a father brave enough to try again. The empty table had not been the end of his story, but the doorway to a future filled with laughter, hope, and the possibility that love, unexpected, unplanned, beautifully imperfect, had finally arrived in his life exactly the way it was meant to.